Hey, what's going on, my friend? How you doing? This is Darrell Evans, and welcome to episode 31 of the MindShift podcast. Really excited to dive into today's show and introduce you to my guest today for a very interesting and fascinating conversation that I think will serve you very well, especially given the times that we're in right now. But before we do all of that, do me a favor, if you haven't already, subscribe to this show. If you're listening on your favorite podcast app, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio. If you're watching this as a replay on Facebook or YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe button, follow us there as well, and leave us your comments. We do this show so that we have these conversations that are, with real people who have real strategies that'll help you find real success. But we also like to know what's working and not working. I got a very cool comment the other day from one of our listeners, and it's those kinds of comments that really keep motivating me to keep bringing this content to you. So as we get into today's show, I'd like to introduce you to Bettina Joy Beaucamp. And Bettina calls herself a transformation expert, a burnout coach. She's an advanced instructor of something called Ortho-Bionomy, and she is a human design and neuroscience geek. And that leads us to today's conversation, which is a discussion around this idea of altruism and gratitude potentially being your best insurance against the COVID-19 crisis. We're going to get into sleep patterns, diet issues. We're going to get into all types of things about mitochondria and brain and some really interesting stuff that I think will bring you some value. Before we get into the show, let me start by saying that none of the information shared today is medical advice that you should run off and take. If you're under the care of a provider, please check with your medical provider. But the tips and strategies shared today are holistic in nature, and hopefully they will serve you. But again, this is not medical advice. Let's get ready and dive into today's show. Well, hey, Bettina, welcome to the MindShift podcast. How are you today?
I'm good, and I'm so grateful that you invited me to talk, because what we're going to be talking about today is really relevant to so many people.
I know when we first talked about you being on the show, we had an entirely different topic plan. We'll probably publish that topic at a later date when it's a little bit more relevant. But today, as we are all sitting in the midst, for those of you listening, many years from now, we are in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis that has not just struck our country, but literally the world. And today's topic, we are going to be really talking about some ideas and strategies that Bettina is going to share on what we call the path from breakdown to breakthrough. No matter where you are right now, we're going through something. You're going through something, and everyone is sitting in a different place. So Bettina, I'm particularly glad to have you because, when we first met and we got to know each other through the mastermind group that we were in, I just always noticed how you could hold space for those of us in the group that had something going on. And there was something interesting about your energy and your ability to hold space for other people's issues. And it was very interesting. So I'm intrigued by what you're going to say today and what you're going to share. And I know you're going to blow our audience away, but why don't we dive in quickly though, and let me have you just introduce yourself to the audience and share a little bit of your thoughts from your heart as we get started.
Thank you, Darrell. So my name is Bettina Joy Beaucamp. I was born and raised in Germany, have been in the United States for almost 40 years now. And I have been obsessed with research and about health and about how the body, mind, spirit all are connected. And because I've been through a lot of illness and issues myself in my life, and many of the kind of contemporary or recommended things didn't work, I had to dive really deep. And I'll just be transparent, I'm completely addicted to research. And sometimes that actually keeps me up at night. So it makes me an addict because I know I should be sleeping, and sometimes I'm researching instead. But other people benefit from that. And I've basically become this kind of library for other people. So I'm going to keep the introduction about myself really brief. And if there's more you want to know, ask along the way, because I think right now, what people really want to know is how do we deal with these unprecedented times of a global crisis? And I just want to, from my heart to everybody's, say how deeply compassionate I feel for the immensity of upheaval that so many people are going through. Every every place from being scared that they or someone they love gets sick to the economics that are changing people's lives more drastically than I think anything has ever happened. The fact that our world has gotten very small, we were in a very global kind of place, and suddenly there's no more airplanes flying. I mean, the skies are blue, which is nice. The air pollution is going down, which is fabulous. The ozone layer is repairing, which is fabulous. And people are freaked out that they can't get what they want. And I'm going to just be a little funny about it. When people stockpile toilet paper or get upset about something not being there is totally understandable, because we are so completely out of control over what's happening to us. We're used to, especially in the United States, but many other places, people are used to deciding about their own lives. And suddenly we're no longer in control of our lives. I mean, we are told when we can go out, what we can do, where we can go, if we can go at all. I just talked to somebody in Panama who said, oh, sorry I didn't get back to you sooner, but I had this 2-hour window in my quarantine when women were allowed to go out shopping. And I barely made it back before, they shut down the roads. I'm going, whoa, by comparison, I'm doing really good. I still get to go
Yeah.
for walks and nobody flags me down. So
Right.
I just want to say that what's happening right now, and the reason why people are so freaked out, is because our brains, I'm a neuroscience geek, and our brains do not like so much unknown. And basically, our lives are unknown now. We have no idea what's going to happen next, what the government is going to do, what our jobs are going to be like, what children's education is going to be like. Some graduations are happening online. People can't attend funerals. I mean, like, our very basic human needs and rights are suddenly controlled by something else. And that freaks us out.
Right.
And that's the reason why I feel it's so important to actually understand how our organisms work and what we can do in order to buff up our immune system, reduce our stress response, and feel our common humanity. Because this social distancing is really difficult. It's very contrary to what our human aspect of ourselves wants to do. I don't know whether you know this, but the research now shows that feeling lonely is more dangerous than smoking to our health and to our longevity. When they have studied centenarians, people who get to be older than 100 years old, the one common denominator was that they actually all feel connected. And so I'm going to talk about this in a minute. What can we do to feel connected instead of starting to be all freaked out that the next person we meet is going to be the one that gives us a disease?
Right, right. Well, thank you for sharing that background. And of course, I've had a chance to know you now for almost a year. And, the amount of research that you have done and the amount of studies and that kind of thing. And for those listening to the show, you're going to definitely want to go back over to the mindshiftpodcast.com website, or look down in the show notes on the podcast app that you're listening to this on right now, because Bettina has offered up to share a number of resources, many of which we will not be able to cover through today's show, but really just as a resource library of how to deal with where we're at right now, which is uncertainty, and how to deal with this all important issue of stress and stress mitigation and stress relief, which is what we're going to dive into next. Let me ask you this, Bettina, before we get started, or as we get started, and if I can get you to be as transparent as possible, how are you dealing with this, or how have you dealt with this isolation scenario and this immediate change in the norm? So from your perspective as a person who has already studied and well-versed, let's see the human side of where you're coming from before we jump in.
So in some ways, I'm probably a little different than normal people because I already often work from home, and because I'm a bit of a hermit. In a lot of ways, I'm an introvert. I'm not super social. I don't go to bars. I don't go out to eat. So all of that isn't different for me. But what's
Mm.
really different is that I dance and meditate and walk and meet with people on levels that are really very close and connected and intimate. They're not sexually intimate, but they're emotionally and spiritually intimate. And not having that has been difficult. So one of
Mm.
the things I've been doing is I've both been offering and participating in Zoom events where people can get together. And I'm also part of Lynn McTaggart's Power of Eight year-long program where we send intentions. And we do that several times a week. And if people don't know about Lynn McTaggart, she is a very, very well-researched and she actually doesn't put anything out unless it's been researched. So she does this thing called Power of Eight intention, and in short periods of time, and this is one of the resources I want to offer, is that she does something, and you can just look her up, lynnmctaggart.com on Facebook, and or Lynn McTaggart, I think it's Lynn McTaggart 2011 or something on Facebook, and she offers a global meditation every Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock Pacific, where we do an intention for everybody to reduce the fear and flatten the curve of COVID-19. And this brings me to something that's so important. During time of isolation, if we start to just be scared, we actually close our hearts. And when we close our hearts, our immune system starts to close down too. And that's actually why I'm saying altruism, compassion, and service are probably our best ticket and health insurance against COVID-19.
Mm.
And that sounds counterintuitive, but it's not. And let me talk to you for a moment about that. Is that okay?
Yeah, let me just throw a comment in as it relates to that. And I think that, as we think about the, because I want to definitely dive into the immune system, because for those who listened to this show a couple of weeks ago, well, depending on when you've listened to this, I discussed what I think leaders should be doing in the midst of fear. And the fourth step in the framework that I discussed in that episode, I want to say that's episode 30 or 31, I discussed the idea of controlling the controllable. Want to talk about and think about is being mindful of the things that we can actually control. So while we're living in an uncertain world, while we're living in in some cases fear, uncertainty, concern, doubt, worry, frustration, all of those things that are on an other side of the energy scale, we need to be careful of how we control the controllable. And so when you talked about this meditation community that has this intention process, for me, meditation's a part of my life, and making sure we take the necessary steps to be intentional about what we're doing is critical. And again, controlling your controllables, staying stress-free, mitigating stress, and doing some of those other things. But I just wanted to mention that really quick and go ahead and dive into that, and then we'll get into
Yes.
some really
And I
important.
just want to say too, because you asked me, what am I doing? I spend a lot of time with my cat. I live alone.
Okay.
So my cat is, she might come and join us. I go for walks with my cat on a leash. She is like a dog. And we snuggle up, and she actually is like incredibly conscientious of my state. So sometimes she actually just lays on top of whatever part of my body needs a little help. So spending time with family, if you're together, spending time with your animal companions, and spending time with whatever you call the greater organizing principles of the universe. Whatever your faith is, I see that the people who believe in something greater than themselves and these surrender, saying this is all horrible, but maybe there is a bigger reason that we don't understand yet, and the universe has my back, God has my back, whatever that is, those people are doing so much better because they don't feel so alone. This comes back to this whole thing about being connected. We get to go outside, and in northern Arizona, the blossoms are all coming out. I know in Alaska, I have a student in Alaska who just showed me 4 feet of snow. They're not quite there yet. But connecting with nature is highly encouraging because we get to see the resilience of nature. Like, we've had several incredible freezes since the blossoms came out, but the trees are not standing there and saying, I'm not going to bloom anymore because I got frozen. They just come back, and maybe this year they don't have fruit, they have a rest. So then next year they'll have more juice to make fruit. So for us to actually connect with nature, see the bees, see the birds, in the northern hemisphere, spring is coming to a lot of areas. Take some solace in the fact that nature is actually repairing right now. As our activities are getting less, nature gets to breathe more. Nobody has asked nature whether she wants all of the pollution that we give her, and she hasn't stopped functioning either. I mean, some races have been having a bad time for a long time. They don't stop. Like, we all get equalized right now with this COVID-19. It doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. It doesn't matter whether you're red, black, white, or yellow. Everybody has been equalized. And to me, while there's so much horrible stuff going on, to me, there's also the hopefulness of maybe we can begin to really be more generous with each other, because generosity is actually a technology. Gratitude, generosity, service are all technology because they move the hyper activation in the back part of our brain that is our survival brain into other parts of our brain that are actually what makes us human. And not only is that a pretty much nicer space to be in, it's what we need for our immune system. So let me dive into that real quick. What happens is when we are stressed, cortisol levels go up because we're supposed to be doing something about a temporary danger that we need to run away from, stepping away from a bus that we didn't see, or being chased by a dog, or being chased by a wild animal. Those are all temporary states. So we have to ratchet up our heartbeat. We have to ratchet up our blood flow to the extremities. And all of this is not new, but I want you to know that your body is doing this all the time unless you're doing something about it right now, because the level of uncertainty is similar to being chased by a bear. So if our cortisol levels are up, there's an inverse relationship between cortisol levels going up and the immune system going down. Because when you're chased by a tiger or a bear or almost run over by a truck, it doesn't matter whether there's a virus in your system that could kill you 3-4 days or weeks or months down the road. Once you've been run over or eaten, all of that is irrelevant. It's also irrelevant what you've eaten. Your body isn't going to digest while you're in a high level of stress. And what happens, which is even more important to know, is there's these little things in our cells. Some of you may remember this from school. They're called mitochondria. And they are organelles that are our energy generating factories in our body. No mitochondria, no life. No mitochondria or reduced mitochondria, no good brain function, no immune response, no healing response, no ability to focus, nothing. Now, what happens, which a lot of people don't know, is not only do your cells and your nervous system go into a response when you're stressed, so do your mitochondria. And what these mitochondria do is they actually stop making energy And instead, they become messenger molecules running around in the body saying, danger, 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 danger. And you can actually measure that within 10 minutes, between 10 and 20 minutes of a stressful event that was registered by the body as stressful. You will find more of the mitochondria DNA in the bloodstream, which is not where they belong. They belong inside our muscles, our brain, our organs, but they actually run around telling everybody that there's danger. And during that time, they don't make energy. So if you remember, if you've had the flu, you feel completely wiped out because your mitochondria and your immune system are busy fighting the disease, and they're not there to reconstruct your muscles. And you usually feel brain fog because they're in that moment when you're really fighting a dangerous disease, that's all your body is going to focus on. But when we're fighting the disease of stress, there isn't anything to fight. And we don't even have the outlet. So you can kind of think about us being in our cars, sitting at a red light with our foot on the brake. But if we don't manage our stress response, we're simultaneously with our other foot on the gas. And we're burning a lot of gas and a lot of rubber going nowhere.
Right.
Which is a really dumb thing to do when you're trying to keep your immune system happy.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm hearing you correctly, and tell me if I'm wrong when I state this, but it's almost as if we're creating an extra thing that didn't exist. Like we're manufacturing something in this way of stress because of our thoughts, and then we're taking away the very thing that we actually need to keep us from the thing that is a real threat. Right?
Exactly.
So there is this real threat. We're not denying there's a real threat. But what we're doing is by putting too much energy on that, by elevating the presence or the awareness of it or the fear of it, we're actually counterproductively having our body do something different, which makes that threat even more so, right? Is that a simple
Absolutely.
way? I'm a non-neuroscience guy, right?
Right. But
anyway.
I just want people to know that without ATP, which is the basic molecule of energy that the mitochondria make, when the mitochondria stop making that, we are basically taking our whole system down. Now, one of the things that is so important that people don't know is that we have to have magnesium for our mitochondria to work properly. I mean, magnesium, as much as it's supposed to be in so many different foods, our soil is so depleted that it's not there anymore. And basically, magnesium is involved in over 600 biochemical processes, which include everything from regulating your heartbeat, just minorly important, to
just small, yeah,
to reproducing our DNA and RNA, just minor details.
Yeah, a couple of small things.
To how our brain works, minor details. To how our muscles work. Just like the heart is a muscle, our other muscles have to have the balance between calcium and magnesium to contract and relax. Magnesium is also extremely important to get us to sleep. So if no magnesium, you're going to be so hyper you can't go to sleep. Now, I'm going to just say something real quick about magnesium. At the moment, not the majority of people talk about magnesium. Everybody's talking about these immune formulas, and most of them are no longer available because everybody stockpiled them or got them. But magnesium is pretty easy to get. And magnesium is one of the really basic things that you need for your immune system. And last research shows almost 70% of the American population is deficient in magnesium. What does that tell you? Magnesium is also totally involved in depression, in anxiety, in migraines. So all the kind of stuff that people are struggling with right now in terms of their moods, magnesium is really going to help. And before we go somewhere else, I just want to say, Stay away from magnesium oxide because it's a very small amount of magnesium oxide gets absorbed and it gives people diarrhea. And that's why magnesium has a bad rap. People say, oh, it's dangerous and it's going to make you go to the bathroom. Well, stay away from magnesium chloride, magnesium oxide, and unless you do need a laxative, magnesium citrate, because all of those are gonna start making you go to the bathroom and you're not actually absorbing that much of it. Okay,
Yeah.
I shut up now.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Before we go to that, because we definitely want to get to some other things. Like I want to talk next about this other stress response you call tend and befriend. But before we do that, let's talk about the natural occurring places where you can pick up magnesium. I'm imagining, by the way, just to restate again, none of this is medical advice. We're saying you need to assess this for your own self, your own situation. Please check with your physician, your providers on this. This is not medical advice. But having said that, where does magnesium in normal foods? Like, where would you recommend? How do you get your doses of magnesium?
You'd love this.
Yeah, I will.
If you had to choose between dark chocolate and kale, what would it be?
Well, tough decision. I think I'm gonna go just by a smidgen. I'm gonna go with dark chocolate.
So dark chocolate is actually one of the best places to get magnesium. It's one of the reasons why women, when they're PMS, crave it, because their body needs more magnesium when a woman goes into her cycle.
Let's do this real quick, because there's all this. We're not talking about go get Hershey's chocolate and get the dark chocolate bar. We're talking like real cocoa, and I don't get into the debate of it, but it's 70%, 80%, 90%. Do you have a recommended dark cocoa formula that you would say is the minimum number?
70 or higher.
70 or higher.
With as little sugar as possible. If you can get some just plain unsweetened chocolate, better yet. If you eat that with a little bit of like a banana or something,
Bettina, you're gonna make all my listeners not listen to the show. You just said eat chocolate that's unsweetened. Are you kidding me right now? Are you kidding me right now? No.
No. So 70% or more, but there are actually some lovely not cooked chocolates that are not bitter, even when they're all chocolate. But I won't make anybody do anything they don't want to do. In the meantime, eat your pumpkin seeds. They have zinc too, and zinc is another part that we really need.
Yeah.
And as you said, not medical advice. You look on the internet and look up what magnesium does, and you'll get to read it all there. I didn't make this up. This is just, part of completely available research.
Yeah.
Green vegetables, of course. Green vegetables. The green vegetables are good for all the minerals. And if you can have lots of them, your body will absorb them more easily.
Yeah, I mean, what we're really talking about here is this idea of controlling your controllables, right? At this point, we're talking about mitigating stress. And I want to talk about this other stress response that I'd never heard of. You wanted to share with me, with our group. But we're going to talk a little bit more about other things you can do to mitigate stress. I know that's the number one thing. Look, I'm an entrepreneur. Bettina, you're an entrepreneur. Our businesses, and I'm not exactly sure, but I know our business was deemed non-essential, as are many of our clients' businesses deemed non-essential. And, in one way that definition doesn't set well with me. But I get it. Like, we're all a part of this war against this situation, but it's going to have real economic impact. And so how do you navigate through it? And that's the number one thing I've been focusing on, is maintaining my level of stress, meaning I'm not trying to predict into the future what things are going to be. I'm taking them moment by moment, but as a leader, I am making the necessary plans. And that means maintaining my daily routines, my meditation times, my food as much as I possibly can, my exercise. And that's really what you're talking about. You're now talking about magnesium and zinc and some other things. Just because I don't want to miss this, and you have so much stuff you could share, we could be here for hours. Talk about this other stress response that you say is rarely talked about. And first of all, talk about what it is, but you call it tend and befriend. And why is that such a big deal today?
So tend and befriend is a biological stress response, and unfortunately, almost all stress was studied on men. So it only kind of came to people's attention in the last 10 years that there's a stress response that women have, which is actually taking care of other people. And the reason why that response is wired into our system is because when biologically, when a woman is pregnant or when she has small children, she can't fight or flee because she's not fast enough to run away or her children aren't big enough to run away. So what women's brains are wired to do instead is to clump together like a school of fish, so that all of a sudden one little fish is going to get gobbled up by a predator in a minute. But if you all clump together and you make yourself look bigger than you are, and when everybody looks out for everybody else, you have this kind of sense of, oh, you know, we're protecting each other, we're protecting each other's children. And I'm saying this stress response exists in men as well now, but it wasn't originally part of a man's stress response because women were designated to take care of children for the most part and have them. You guys don't have children, so it's a different thing. You're supposed to be the ones protecting. But when you're out hunting, you know, for whatever it is, you know, right now you're hunting for clients, but when you used to be hunting for food, you know, you don't all clump together and say, "Hey, Joe!" You know, that's one of the reasons why communication tends to be easier for women, because it's part of the stress response. And so we all talk about what's going on. We create oxytocin. Oxytocin for a woman actually reduces their stress. And for men, being able to do something, testosterone reduces their stress. That's where some of the difficulties come in between men and women when they're trying to have a relationship, is that she wants to talk to reduce her stress, and he goes, what the hell am I supposed to
He
do?
wants to work out. He wants to
give
exercise.
me, well, not, or he may say, he's going to give her a bunch of advice because he's trying to solve a problem, because by solving a problem that elevates his testosterone, which reduces his stress. So this is especially important if you're all stuck in the house together, is for a woman to say, you can help me so much if you can just listen to me for a moment, and please don't give me any advice. So that way the guy knows, oh, I'm actually doing something useful. I'm not just spinning my wheels. So that's an aside, but this tendon befriend is actually one of the things that oxytocin is the bonding hormone. The moment we express care for others, we're actually opening our hearts and we feel connected. And that's one of the reasons why I talked about the meditation on Wednesday mornings with Lane McTaggart, and there's many others. There's prayer circles and this and that and the other. When we feel connected to others and contribute, we actually reduce our own stress because we feel useful. And this is true for men and women, because for both parts, we end up feeling like we're doing something useful, we're coming together for a common cause, and we take away the stress of thinking of others as being dangerous.
Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. You know, you talk a lot about the, and you just kind of touched on it, about this idea of a contribution and in the way that you guys are participating in your intention circles. Talk a little bit about this, just continuing down this path of contribution and the importance of it as a human need, and this idea of altruism. I know you're a big believer in that. Share a little bit with our audience about that aspect of this idea of stress and immune resilience.
Okay, so again, I've talked about the stress lives in the lower part of our brain and the middle part of our brain, and it's very much about instinctual reactions. And basically, as soon as the needs for food and shelter and basic safety have been taken care of, our next most important human need is to be a contribution to others. This has been studied everywhere in the world, and every single tribe and culture has responded to what gives them the most amount of satisfaction. What's most important to them is to be a contribution. So when we take away that need of people, when they're just constantly in their stress response, we're reducing ourselves out of our humanity. And so finding ways to contribute to others is extraordinarily important right now, because just to come back to that stress response, when our cells are closed because we're freaked out, even the good nutrients that we take in can't get in, because you can't get something in that's tightly closed.
Right.
When we're stressed, it's not time to learn things, and it's not time to absorb things. And so you could be taking all the best supplements, all the best medicines, all the best herbs, but if you're totally stressed, it's gonna just bounce off. Like your cells are little crystal balls, and nothing is gonna go in.
Yeah.
So that thing of contributing in altruism actually opens our heart, opens our cells, and then our cells are receptive, both to the love from others, as well as all the physical nutrients that we're putting in. So if you're scrambling to get a bunch of stuff, and then you come home and you're totally stressed and you shovel all that stuff down, you're just making your system work a lot.
Right.
And nothing actually happens because you can't stuff it into the cells if the cell isn't open to it.
Yeah, you'll just eliminate it, right? Your body will just get rid of it and push it right through.
And that's a lot of work, actually. And let me talk really briefly about what's happening to people right now. So they're glued to their screens, which is very difficult for the brain. Apart from the fact that the more horrible news you read, the more you're going to get aggravated. So my personal recommendation, this is what I do, is I don't listen to any of the news. I just get snippets, because whatever pictures and words we get are going to impact us more deeply than if we just read it somewhere.
Right.
So if you want to reduce your stress, don't listen and watch the news. Read what somebody said, and whatever the next regulation is. That's one thing. The other thing is, get off your screens altogether, because it's a stress to the brain to be on screens all the time. And it like jacks up our system. The other thing is, people get bored and they eat all the time. Eating all the time, especially sugar-laden foods that are supposed to help us feel better because they create a big dopamine response. You know, like when your phone pings, it's like, oh, who called? Oh, email. That's all dopamine in our brain. People are so overstimulated with all that already, and then they eat sugary foods and they watch television, and they're frying their brains. I know it's not popular, but intermittent fasting is one of the best things you can do right now to take the stress off of your body.
For those who've never heard of intermittent fasting, give like a just quick definition. I know what it is, but for those listening that do not.
Yeah. So the average American eats 18 times a day. 18 times a day. That's average. So some probably eat 30 times a day.
18.
That includes, I'm not just saying food that includes like drinks that have calories in them. I'm not talking full meals. I'm talking about grazing. I'm talking about grazing.
Grazing, yeah.
Every time you eat, you make your body work. We think that we get energy from eating. It's not true. Most people, their blood sugar levels are so screwed up that they're constantly topping off, making their pancreas work overtime. The insulin problems are unbelievable. Insulin resistance is like off the charts. We have, they call Alzheimer's diabetes 4 because it's actually a sugar problem. Sugar is a toxin to our system. Sugar downregulates your immune system. Sugar takes ridiculous numbers of molecules of magnesium. One of the things magnesium does is it actually helps break down glucose. If we overdo the sugar, we completely deplete our magnesium, which then becomes a really huge issue, as I already talked about. So intermittent fasting is, if you can tolerate it, start out with at least 12 hours of a rest between dinner and breakfast. If you can push breakfast to 14 hours and you're not hypoglycemic, do it. Then eat, and then don't eat for several hours. Then eat again, and then don't eat for several hours. All the snacking is a huge strain on the immune system, and it actually doesn't help. It makes you more tired rather than more energized. So intermittent fasting, not popular, but I'm going to recommend it, because if people are sitting in front of their televisions or their computers watching Netflix and stuffing food into their mouths all day long, they're trashing their immune system.
Yeah. And I think what I would add to that is a good way to think about it is if we go back to the times when we didn't have a 24-hour online, always on world, essentially the way we, operated was, let's say the man left the house to go to work, kill the animal, bring home the bacon. Mom was home taking care of the kids. Dinner was at 6. That was done for dinner. And you wouldn't really eat again until 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock the next morning for breakfast. So intermittent fasting, while it's got a neat little tag on it, that's just the old way that it used to be. Today, what we're talking about is because we have this 24-hour society, we have here in Las Vegas, you can work any hour of the day when we are open. But the issue, though, like you're saying, is cutting off these meals and giving your body a chance to enter its natural cycle of recovery on a daily basis, right? Now, if you're an athlete and you're training for something, you've got a different regimen. This is obviously not for you, but it is interesting just to give your body its natural space and rhythms. And I've talked about this on an episode from a different angle as it relates to sleep. And that is how we need to make sure we're not consuming food close into those hours of going to sleep. Because even though, some people will say, well, yeah, I can eat ice cream and go straight to bed. No one's saying you can't go to sleep. We're saying that your rhythm of sleep cycle has just been destroyed because you now have to do what Bettina just said, which is your body has to now process that insulin and sugar spike, and you will go to sleep, but you will have an improper sleep cycle throughout that night. And you'll wake up the next day, groggy. So we won't get into that part of it, but I admit that I used to disrespect sleep in the sense that I used to work, and maybe I was eating later in the night and not paying attention to what effect it really had because I went to sleep. So right. I know people who say they drink coffee right before they go to bed, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine. So anyway, I don't want to get
can I just say real quick, sleep is paramount, and it's really difficult to get good quality sleep when you're stressed out. So I'm going to just say the 5 most important things. I have done a ridiculous amount of research on sleep because I used to be an insomniac, and I tell you, I know how horrible it is and how that wreaks havoc with your body and your ability to heal. So the 5 most important things that I've called out of my intense amount of research is get off your screens at least 2 hours before you go to sleep. If you can, like the reason why you see slight blue in my glasses is because these are actually blue blocking glasses.
Do they really help?
Oh my God. I cannot even tell you.
How do you know? Because I have it on mine supposedly, but how do you know?
I actually tried it because one of my co-teachers, when we were doing online classes, said, you look so weird with that blue in your eyes. And I have blue eyes already. And so you look a little devilish with that blue glow in your eyes. Okay. So I used my other glasses. And oh my God, first of all, the fatigue I had in my eyes was off the charts. So and it was the first time that I used regular glasses over the blue blocks.
Okay.
So the eye fatigue was huge, but I also noticed how it affected my sleep.
Gotcha.
Now, the blue blocks do not justify me staying on my screen. Right. The other day I did, and I paid for it.
Yeah.
Please do not go to bed with your cell phone. Don't even take your cell phone into your room because
you're not making friends right now, just so you know.
I know. I'm just letting you know what I know. Right. If you take your cell phone into your room where you sleep, you're being bombarded with EMFs. And if you wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and there's a little ding on your phone, you'll probably turn it off. You'll probably turn it on. So here's what happens. Blue light reduces your melatonin production by 4 hours by 50%. In case you don't know, melatonin is what helps you go to sleep. But in case you really don't know, which I didn't know until recently, is that the mitochondria in your brain need melatonin in order to heal and replenish and reproduce, which means if you don't get enough melatonin in your system, you're going to be operating on mitochondria from yesterday or from 3 days ago, and they're not functioning very well.
Right.
And so you're going to actually act as if you're hungover from alcohol overuse.
Right.
So yes, I'm totally willing to not be popular.
Yeah. Well,
I'm just saying, get off your screens and don't take them.
Let me throw one out there for those of you listening to this, and you're like, Bettina, you lost your mind talking about get off my screen 2 hours ahead of time, and the EMFs. Listen, I'm 100% behind what you're saying. Let me tell people just another way to think about it. So 2 hours, okay. So if you can't do 2 hours, do an hour. If you can't do an hour, do a half hour. What she's saying is give your eyes and your brain a chance to unwind from all of the stuff that's going to hurt your ability to get good rest. Let me tell you another strategy you can use, to the point of the dingings and the notifications. I've been a practitioner of this for years. Number one, my phone is close to my bed, but it's on the desk, but I turn it upside down. I don't allow notifications on my phone. I've told people this for years. I don't care if you text me in the middle of the night. Don't call me in the middle of the night. I will figure it out in the morning. People say, well, Darrell, what if there's an emergency? Well, that's the problem. Everyone lives as if there's going to be an emergency. I've been doing this for 10 years. There ain't been an emergency. The point is your time to sleep. And I used to disrespect sleep. You're hearing this from somebody who in his 30s disrespected sleep. What I mean by that is, out of the entrepreneurial grind and hustle to succeed, I would sleep 3-4 hours a night. And I used to think that I was okay. I wasn't okay. Let's be clear. Then enters the cell phone, then enters the eating late, then enters the terrible food cycle. Believe me, it didn't take long to put on 40 pounds. So I am on the other side of this conversation and I'm attesting to what she's saying. Now, does that mean I get off my phone every night by 2 hours? No, but at 9 p.m., I have a reminder on my phone, shut it down, homie. Like shut it down. Computers, shut it down. Phones, all that. Social media, shut it. Whatever I'm doing, shut it down. So anyway, I don't want to take you too far off, but I wanted to really just say to people that these frameworks are real. These impacts are real. And if you start to just move a little closer to these ideas, bracketing your food, improving certain nutrients, getting away from the devices, if you're having these issues, and right now we're talking about reducing our stress.
And reducing our likelihood of getting an infection. Because the only reason that you can get an infection is we have an innate immune system. Even though bodies don't know about COVID-19, we have what's called an innate immune system. And that innate immune system says, whoa, something's going on here. We need to pay attention.
Let's go to work. Right.
And if you have been trashing your system with bad food, stress, and no sleep, that part of your system isn't working because you're just barely hanging on. So I'm just giving you strategies so hopefully you don't have to deal with being sick. Yeah. You can avoid getting sick by following that. And I'm with you 100%. So if you normally fall asleep with the television on, at least maybe just listen to the television instead of watching it. Put something over your eyes. If the television is your lullaby, and I know some people for whom it is, watch something that's boring that you already know, put something over your eyes so you only hear it and you don't see it. If you are used to being on your phone until you go to sleep, take yourself off 10 minutes earlier each day. Everybody can make 10 minutes. And if you fall off the wagon, you start over the day after, But that's the direction you want to be going, because you don't want to stress yourself out by suddenly not doing something that you're used to, because every time we change a habit, that is a little stressful too.
Right, right. And that's what we're doing. We're talking about controlling the controllables. So wherever you are in the paradigm of these ideas, it's just being cognizant, self-aware, and what can you ultimately keep control of, and make those small steps. It's funny. I just want to go back to one little thing, and then we need to get ready to move to the final points and close. There was a Joe Rogan podcast, one of the most popular, if not the most popular podcast on Apple Podcasts. He had Dr. Michael, and I had to look it up so I don't mispronounce his name, Dr. Michael Osterholm. And he has been one of the, besides, the primary doctors that are out on the front end talking about it on the news, he has been studying the coronavirus processes and these things for years. He's actually written about them in a book. But to the point of one thing that Joe Rogan asked him during the show, and what Dr. Osterholm's response was, and I do hope he's a doctor, apologize if he's not a doctor, but in any case, he simply said that his research and studies organization has found that the problem that Americans will face as it relates to being able to recover from the virus, he said one of the biggest killers for us will be obesity. And to hear him say that, sure, there are going to be underlying respiratory issues and those people who already have an underlying medical condition, but outside of that, he said the thing that is going to shock Americans in the system of this process unfolding will be how obesity, those who are obese, perhaps will, and this goes back to the food conversation that we were having, the nutrient conversation, in the fact that he said that that's going to be one of the challenges for those that may struggle with this virus if they get it. And he said our population here, and don't quote me on it, but it was in the high 40s percentage of the population in the United States, which is unlike many of the other countries that are fighting this as well. So anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent there, but
no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is one of the bright sides that I see for this virus, is that people actually are having time to pause if they're willing to use this time to pause and think about what they really want in their lives.
Right.
And for many people, changing their habits around how they live is pretty important. And this brings me to another thing, like people now, for the most part, have an opportunity to spend some time outside because they're not in hermetically sealed offices. And so getting out into the sun, getting some sunshine during the day also helps you sleep, because it makes a bigger difference between day and night, which really improves your melatonin production. It also is really important for vitamin D production, which is extremely important for the immune system. And so there's opportunities for us right now to go, I could go through a little discomfort because I don't have to show up for work at 7 a.m. tomorrow. If I'm a little cranky because I'm eating less sugar and because I'm having fluctuations, I'm going to be okay. Maybe I do want to start increasing some nutrients in my system. Maybe I'm going to have a little more time to cook right now. Maybe I have more time to really get connected with my loved ones. One of the things that stresses people out to the max is all their unfinished projects. People are starting to clean up their houses,
right,
finishing up projects, starting to grow a garden. Those are all things that allow us to actually get more in rhythm with ourselves and each other and nature. And maybe that will be one of the good outcomes that can happen from what's going on. And I just want to say real quick, so if you do get COVID-19, there's lots of different ways to treat it. And I'll give some information to Darrell that isn't mine, but there's homeopathics that have been very successfully used. There's a bunch of herbs that have been very successfully used for all different kinds of viral infections. There is the combination of vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, selenium, and magnesium. Those 5 or 6, if you can get them into your system, you're supercharging your immune system. In addition to reducing the stress, you want to do both of them together. and getting sleep, if you do all of those things, they are not rocket science. If you do all of those things, the likelihood that you're going to get it. And I'll just share something really quick. My sister's in Germany. There's a lot of COVID going on. My niece is a 15-year-old beautiful girl that is quite popular in her school of 1,200 kids. She's not connected to everybody, but she's connected to a lot of people. Out of her friendship circle, there's only 3 families where COVID showed up. 2 of the families, it kind of made the rounds in the family. Everybody got well, staying home, didn't have to go to the hospital. There's one family that we've been praying for and doing intention for, where the father is in the hospital in critical condition. So for me, it was kind of interesting to really look at this from somebody, I'm not just listening to the news and somebody says, oh, how horrible or how not horrible it was. It's like in my sister's friendship circle, the occurrence isn't that great. And what they say is more than 80% of the people are going to get over it without a problem. So it's good to know that some of the deaths that they are reporting, the person may have had COVID, but they're not actually looking at what the real reason for the death was. When somebody had a heart attack and they also find COVID in that person, the person didn't get killed by COVID. They got killed by a heart attack. And so some of the numbers at the moment are not entirely accurate. They're all lumped together for COVID when many times there were other reasons. So I just want to kind of reduce a little bit the panic about the mortality rate. Yes, there are people dying of COVID, but the numbers from some of the scientists that I'm listening to that are very well respected are showing that how they're tracking it is not entirely scientific.
Yeah. And what we'll do is we're as we mentioned, we're going to link up some additional resources because again, we could have been here for a long, long time. Bettina, I just want to thank you for your insight. Number one, the years and years that you have spent time studying, not just neuroscience, but just this idea of health and well-being, because I think that's where a lot of your studies have led. And, while some of the things you shared today could have seemed like does to some people, they really aren't, because if you heard it, one of our mentors says common sense isn't always common practice. And so I just want to thank you for unpacking a number of these items around mitochondria and the brain and the stress and literally supplements and vitamins and nutrients, because at the end of the day, we have to deal with ourselves and take control of those things which we can control. We don't know and again, all the other best practices, washing your hands, sanitizing, et cetera, social distancing. I'm very confident we're going to get through this. I know it's going to be to the way we started this conversation. It's out of customary practice for us all to be confined to our homes and limited on where we can go and businesses to be shut down. And before we go, let me also state for the record that we are here to say and support all of the men and women in all of the different arenas, whether it's our doctors, our nurses, any medical practitioners that are out there on the front lines fighting this and doing what they can to protect, first of all, serve the people that are ill, protect those who are not ill, who are really putting themselves in harm's way as well, just as we would support our military, our first responders, and, for the actions of our government that are doing what they can to get this thing under wraps. And I know that none of us want to be here. We can all, go back and say, hey, we should have listened to Bill Gates when he did his TED Talk in 2015. But to sit and point fingers that, well, they didn't listen to Bill Gates in 2015 ain't going to get us anywhere, right? So the idea of taking control of what you can control, implementing some of these ideas as they relate to your life and your business and your health circumstance is just our encouragement for the day. And so, Bettina, thank you again for being with us. Any final thoughts? I know you're so passionate about this, but any final thoughts for our audience before we wrap up?
The most important thing is be kind to yourselves and each other, because, just putting our hands on our heart and breathing and saying, it's okay. Right now, I'm safe. And giving thanks, just like you did, gratitude to the people who deliver the groceries, the people who are in the pharmacies, the people who are in the hospitals, just to really think about the enormity. Like, if you're currently not in the hospital, you're like, you got so much to be grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can focus on the gratitude for all that we have and the immense blessings that most of our lives are still having, that is like one of the most important things we can do. And it elevates our mood, it elevates our immune system, and it makes us a better person. Who wants to be around the people who are freaked out? You know, we want to be a contribution by being kind, compassionate, and serving others. And that's what you do, Darrell. And I know you're up to your eyeballs with your agency, and I mean, it's like insane. So the fact that you even offered to do this, I have such immense gratitude. You, I mean, are one of my role models when it comes to, you know, service and kindness and keeping things in perspective. And
Thank
what
you.
you've been through in your own life is amazing. So thank you for having this podcast. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being one of the people who is a contribution.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Bettina. I really, really take those words and they just warm me up. I really appreciate that. So, Bettina, where can our listeners find out more about you?
So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I actually finally got over being a social media grump and made a profile there a few weeks ago, and you can find me there. And there's also going to be an article that I've just written about a lot of the information that I've shared with you at this during this podcast. You can email me directly, just simple. So my LinkedIn profile is just my name. So it's Bettina Joy Beaucamp after the linkedin.com /in/ Bettina. So you can find me there, but it's easy. There's not many Bettina Beaucamps around. And you can actually email me directly. If you have a specific question or you need some support with something, you can email me at bettinajoy2@gmail. So it's BETTINAJOY2@gmail. And so if you need something, send me an email. I have an older website that I'll also give you. It's cecredit.com, cecreditnow.com, which I'm in the process of updating. So you'll find out a little bit more about me, but it's an old website that I'm one of the many projects that I can actually do now that I'm not seeing clients all the time.
Gotcha.
Though I have been doing a lot of Zoom calls with people as well to help them during this time of crisis.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for sharing that and opening up the invitation for folks to reach out to you. Thank you so much for doing that. Hey, everyone. This has been Darrell Evans, Bettina Beaucamp on the MindShift podcast. Please listen to this episode. Please share it. If you are following us on Facebook, like the page, leave us a comment. If you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, be sure to click the subscribe button and leave us a comment about what you thought. You can also go get the show notes and many of the resources that Bettina is going to share over at the mindshiftpodcast.com. And yeah, this is a time where we all have to stick together. We are all in this together. We will flatten the curve. We are all working in this together. And if we all continue to work together, we'll all be back to our normal lives in no time. So until next time. I'm
hoping even better lives.
Better, right? We'll come back better and stronger. So until next time, we'll say goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,